Greetings and felicitations, my minions. I am your evil doctor. Remember during my review of Marvel Comics number 1, I said this? This is a one-and-done anthology story. Well, that might not be entirely accurate. Which, in my defense, it was described as a complete adventure story, implying that was it. There was no other stories to be told with those characters. It also had a story title, but no character name. As I mentioned in the previous video, this story was written and drawn by Arthur Pinajian, who was a Golden Age comic book writer and artist who primarily worked for Centaur and Quality Comics. But he also produced work for Fox, Fiction House, Dynamic, Lev Gleason, and of course this one story for Timely, which he wrote under the pseudonym of Tom Dixon. His career in comics lasted about 6 years, from 1936 to 1942, and at one time had 3 ongoing concurrent series with Quality Comics. Reynolds of the Mounted, which lasted 50 issues, Invisible Justice, which lasted 32 issues, and Madame Fatal, which lasted 22 issues. Now, his earliest work was for Centaur Comics in Funny Picture Stories number 1, published September 18th, 1936. It was called The Floating City, so clearly from the start he wanted his work to have story titles. Below it, he puts a complete Dick Kent adventure story, so you can see the echo of Jungle Terror here. But in this, he also adds the name of the main character of Dick Kent. This tells me this isn't an anthology story, but an ongoing feature that doesn't have a continuing storyline. Though in this case, Dick Kent's next appearance in Funny Picture Stories number 2 actually picks up right after the end of the story in issue number 1. Anyway, we come next to Funny Picture Story number 3, and we get our first jungle adventure story. It's called Tyrant's Gold, published on December 1st, 1936. It's set in Central America, and we get introduced to the full cast, including a young blonde boy named Tom, who is a nephew of Professor Benton, whose first name is Jim. Let me remind you that in Jungle Terror, we had a blonde boy named Tim, who is the nephew of Professor Roberts, whose first name is John. So clearly Art is a big fan of recycling. So next we come to Funny Picture Stories number 6, published on March 1st, 1937. In a story titled Darts of Death, we're introduced to a new character called Dr. Roberts, which I don't believe is the same character as Professor Roberts, even though he kind of looks like Professor Roberts, and he's doing his favorite thing, which is being captured by natives. And this brings us to Marvel Comics number 1, published on August 31st, 1939, and Jungle Terror, which, on the surface, looks like a distillation of Art's Dick Kent series, with the character of Ken Masters playing the Dick Kent role. At this point, Art had 2 ongoing series with Quality Comics, and perhaps Funnies Incorporated commissioned Art to do a series for the brand new Timely, and he decided to rework his Dick Kent series. Or maybe they just wanted Art to do a story to fill out the book. Who knows? However, there is a twist. When I was looking up information about Maurice Gutworth for my video on Daring Mystery Comics number 1, I came across this. Centaur Comics Masked Marvel number 1, published on June 25th, 1940. And here we get a sequel to Jungle Terror, a story titled The Quest of the Golden Idol. In the title banner, we're introduced to the same 3 characters of Ken Masters, Professor Roberts, and front and center Tim Roberts, described as that boy adventurer. I guess like Johnny Quest in Rusty Venture. The story opens presumably in Central America, as the trio have a map to an ancient Aztec city, where they hope to find a golden idol. Oh, and Professor Roberts' first name is now apparently Peter. After enduring some rapids and an encounter with an inexplicable tiger, they find their first Aztec landmark. And then, while Ken and Roberts have their backs turned, Tim gets nabbed by an Aztec warrior through a secret door in the monument. If this was a normal review, I would totally be dunking on this, but I will just let this slide. Anyway, the men figure the Aztecs somehow nabbed Tim, and they have to hurry to keep him from being sacrificed. So Ken and Roberts find a couple of Aztecs and follow them to the hidden Aztec city. They manage to sneak in and find Tim being marched for the sacrifice, which happens to take place at the golden idol that they were looking for. They open fire and rescue Tim, who nabs the idol in the process. They manage to find an underground passage that leads them to the original doorway that Tim was kidnapped through, and escape on a boat. It ends with Ken Masters suggesting they could go on other trips. Well, that was a letdown. Anyway, this would not be the only time a story in Timely would be continued in another comic at another company. In fact, in my last video, there was an example of a story that first started in another book and continued at Timely. Now, I'm not sure why the series jumped companies, but I do have several theories. Now, The Quest of the Golden Idol was published nearly a year after Jungle Terror, so it's possible that it was an unused inventory from Funnies Incorporated that Centaur wanted to serve as filler for their new book. Maybe that the second story was originally intended to appear in Marvel Mystery Comics number 2. Now, one possibility is that Martin Goodman simply had no interest in a second installment of that series and decided to go with American Ace as a replacement. Or possibly he thought it was a one-and-done story, much like what I assumed. Now, what's interesting about that is that American Ace originally appeared in Motion Picture Funnies Weekly number 1, the same one the Submariner first appeared in. So it was already made. I think it's possible that it served as a last-minute substitution due to the second chapter of Jungle Terror Terror not being available. Now, as I mentioned before, Marvel Comics was initially cancelled right off the bat, and then uncancelled due to amazing sales for issue number 1. So perhaps Art decided not to work on his second installment upon hearing it was cancelled, and upon finding out the second issue was actually going forward, tried to put together another story, but was too late to get it in by the deadline. Or perhaps he was more focused on his 2 current series for quality, and missed the deadline for Marvel Mystery Comics number 2. Or perhaps he never intended to add a new chapter, but once Marvel Comics' popularity exploded, he wanted back in, and finds out that ship had sailed. In the second story, it seems that Art forgot he named Professor Roberts John in the first story, and ended up calling him Peter in the second one. This is similar to Stan Lee calling Spider-Man Peter Palmer in the first issue of Spider-Man, which was published over half a year after his first appearance in Amazing Fantasy number 15. So perhaps Jungle Terror really was originally supposed to be one and done, and Art decided to give his characters another go. So there it is, my first supplemental installment. I'm not a comic historian, I'm just a guy that likes to read comics, so I will often get things wrong, or do a really half-assed job on research. So this will serve as a venue for corrections, or expanded explanations, and hopefully not become a regular feature. So until next time, stay good. I'm evil. I mean evil. Oh boy. I'm evil. Well, that was a letdown.